If you allow me, we'll spend a couple of minutes to take the questions from our viewers, which we thank them. We received tens of questions, and our colleagues did a great job in ordering them and clustering them. And I'll just ask them without a specific format. So I'll just read those questions. So there's a question for Dr. Silvia. The questions, the viewer says, what does learning assessment data reveal so far in terms of progress to achieving the Education 2030 agenda, particularly with regards to the MENA region? Dr. Silvia?
Yes, thank you so much. And that's quite a good question. I think it was a good elaboration. Unfortunately, the data shows to us that we're not progressing at a pace that is good, so enough. We have still many excluded kids that we are actually thinking that they are not acquiring the learning skills, but also the systems are not showing enough improvement. We really need to do a huge effort, and especially in the kids that are the most disadvantaged. So the data shows that the progress is really not good, and for the reason, this is a concern of all of us regarding that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Another question in different matter, Dr. Paulo. A viewer is asking, how can the research communities be engaged in support of evidence-based policies and practices?
Thank you for the question. Very good question. I mean, in a range of ways. First of all, by being provided access to the data that is generated by the system. So all issues about privacy of data need to be dealt with in the systems, and then restricted use options could be provided to the researchers. So having access to the raw data to actually perform research. Also being provided incentives by the education authorities themselves that can have education research plans, whereby they commission research to education researchers. And then generally as advisors in advisory groups to implement particular types of policies in which they're experts, and more generally also in following reforms and evaluating the implementation of those reforms.
Great, amazing. Thank you, Doctor. Another question, this time is for Dr. Shwetlena. So I think it's a great question. So the viewer is asking, how can global metrics be made more accessible to students, parents, and schools in order to convey important information on the quality of education? And do you have examples of initiatives that aim to engage key stakeholders, inform them of their performance based on global metrics, and empower them with the information to affect change?
It's a great question. It's also a tough question. I hope my other panelists can also come in if needed. So I think global metrics can play a role. Like you said, I think they can create this surge, right, of pressure from the ground up. A key ingredient for that would be dissemination, right? So the one thing global metrics need to do is that not only should they be transparent and meaningful, they should also be intuitive. People should be able to understand what they mean. And I think sometimes the global community emphasizes so much the first part, but doesn't emphasize so much the easy understandability, the intuitiveness of the measure. And then, you know, I think the global community and the local community has to then invest in dissemination, right? Which I think we're getting much better at. We have more tools now than we used to earlier. We have social media, and young people have much more access to these tools than they used to have. And there's also average level of education is higher. So I think if we construct the metrics right and we invest in dissemination, I think it will reach people. In terms of local salience, I really like the point that Paulo made earlier. It's that it has to be a combination of global and local, right? It cannot just be what the country is doing as a whole. I think people are much more likely to respond when it is also linked to their community, their state, their schools. So I think people should find a balance between those two. If people are only communicating global, then a lot of people, local people may feel, you know, this is not something where I can intervene. And The final point that I will make is that doing more, it's not only about disseminating what we produce, it's also about involving local policymakers and local community in the conversation, right? So it has to be a conversation. So we have to give local stakeholders a way to respond back to us. And I think, again, we're getting better and better. And some of the work that I know Silvia is leading does involve making sure that the voices that have been excluded so far are included in this discussion. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Shwetlena. Your Excellency, Dr. Tareq, I received a couple of questions. People seems to be excited about the role of NDMO. I'll just read two questions. I think they are related to each other. So the first is what are the measures being taken by the Saudi Data and AI Authority to encourage the use of data by various stakeholders? Is data freely available? Second question is, does SADAIA, Saudi Data and AI Authority, play a role in overseeing the use of personal data by the private sector?
Let me start with the second question. For the personal, this is actually, if we go back to the two main function for the NDMO, is the data management and personal data protection. So for the data management, actually, it's cover only the government agencies. But for the personal data protection, actually, we cover both the public entities and private sector. So yes, we oversee the both of them.
Great, amazing. The first question was related to, is data freely available? I think they
actually, we are only 1 year old, so don't rush for that. So we have the open data policy now, and it's it should be effective now. Also, we have the more important one is the data sharing policy. Data sharing policy will ensure that the data will be shared by the government entities. So the question here, and this is the important part of it, actually, people, entrepreneurs looking for the data, most likely from the private sector. And in fact, until now, we don't have a mandate over the data of the private sector. But we are trying to ease the process. So we leave it to the sectors themselves to arrange that.
Great. دكتور نياف، السؤال هذا يعني أعتقد سؤال مهم جدا. الأخ الكريم يسأل: ما هي المناهج التي تتبعها السعودية ودول العالم لمواجهة التداعيات المستقبلية لأزمة كورونا؟
The question is about what are the regulations that are traced by Saudi Arabia in order to avoid the ambiguity and the COVID-19 crisis, and what is the impact after COVID-19 process? What is the impact of COVID-19 on the evaluation process of education, and how can we focus on that in terms of the what we talked about here in the session? Thank you, Dr. Sattam. I think the data process can be different, but there is an experience for ETEC that should be available, and it was mentioned yesterday in the opening speech of the conference by His Excellency, the Chairman of the Board of Directors of ETEC, regarding online or remote working and evaluation using AI and the modern technologies, which was a unique experience globally. And another thing, our colleagues in the National Center for Evaluation and Academic Accreditation are performing evaluation for the programs and of the institutions of higher education online and remotely without any problem. If there is a need for a field visit, they use the modern telecommunication technologies for that goal. There is a lesson that we learned from COVID-19, and the whole world learned that lesson, that education and evaluation should continue to exist. And another thing that is important is that the world should learn that it is time to make sure that educational systems all over the world need to develop their systems to be ready for any crisis. We are speaking about things that we are witnessing now, programming of education and the thing that we need. When the crisis occurred, we discovered that the whole world was not as ready as it was expected. Maybe the COVID crisis may be a good opportunity for the whole world to create better data that will help them get better in the future.
We are concluding our session, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank the audience for bearing with us this evening during this rich thematic session. I also would like to thank the Education and Training Evaluation Commission for organizing this conference. And also, I would like to quote Dr. Shwetlena. She said, learning is invisible. And I think she also said data and metrics will make the learning visible. So with that, we conclude our session. Thank you so much to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
شكرا معاليكم. Thank you, Your Excellency. حضورنا الكرام, our distinguished guests. شكرا لحسن استماعكم. بهذا تنتهي جلستنا ما قبل الختامية في المؤتمر الدولي لتقويم التعليم والتدريب. نلقاكم في الجلسة الختامية ومراسم اختتام المؤتمر بعد توقف قصير قدره 5 دقائق. Thank you for your participation in the session. We will meet you again for our final session after a 5-minute short break. Thank you.